Yeah.
And it said, nope.
All right, we are live. Welcome to the WatchWell Podcast. My name is Parker, and this is my co-host, Nick. We are live, and we are talking about movies of the 80s tonight. Let's see. Go ahead, follow us on social media. We've got Facebook, Instagram. You can head on over to our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, all the content on there. And Twitter, we started posting stuff on Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, right? And you can
Well, you started.
I started. That's correct. I started. Let's see. I'm kind of going down the list here. I don't want to forget anything. If you guys are interested, I did a WatchWell podcast movie review. It's like a mini review with my 4-year-old son, Ronan. You can check that out on the Facebook page. It was a lot of fun. We've got a few episodes coming up. Actually, we did How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days for Valentine's Day. So if you wanted to check out one of our earlier February episodes, you can check that out. And then tomorrow, Back to the Future comes out. And let's see. Yeah, Back to the Future. So that will be out tomorrow at 3 p.m. And tonight is a special night because we've got a guest. We have Pastor Jason Adams, pastor of Community, right?
We'll go with that. Yep.
Community Church in Muncie, Indiana, and an aficionado. I think that might be the fanciest word we've used on the channel so far.
Yeah,
and an aficionado of the 80s.
Those are that's setting the bar pretty high. I don't know if this is going to work.
So just to give a bit of an intro into how much of an aficionado of the 80s. So not only is that like your decade, right? That is like all of your nostalgia is the 80s.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Like,
yeah.
How long ago was it? 8 or 9 years ago, we did a topical sermon series of I Love the 80s at Community Church, right? With songs and things like that. I don't remember what every song was, but do you remember?
Oh, it was, so we did Eye of the Tiger. We did White Snake, Here I Go Again on my own.
Yep.
Who
Wants to Rule, or Everyone Wants
Everybody
to Rule
Wants to Rule the World.
Yeah.
Yep, that was the third one. And then the fourth one was we set up a bar and had like a whole set on the stage for Cheers.
Yeah, the show Cheers. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Before we forget, if you guys want to check out Community Church, you can go to www.beincommunity.com. Yeah. Nick, I know we didn't have time before we jumped on to look at comments. Do you want to go for that? Pastor Jason, I thought it'd be fun to include you in that because there was a YouTube short that I put out for the podcast, and I pretty much got raked through the coals in the comment section. They tried to steal my soul. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of,
all right,
bring you in and
roll.
maybe get a fresh perspective on some of these comments. So these are going to be completely at random. We haven't talked about which ones we're bringing up. So whatever Nick decides to bring up is what's going to happen. So
hold on. Yeah, I'm pulling them up. I'm looking through them. So just to give a little bit of a taste of the types of comments you got on this one. So here's one that says, "What's the opposite of the subscribe button?" So they did not like. Why is this in my feed? Take your Bible and leave my doorstep, please. Let's see if I can find a better one that we can actually, that there's actually some type of, okay, so how about this? We'll see how you would respond to this. This says that if God is real, the Christian God certainly isn't the one I would put my faith in. No idea why I'm being shown this nonsense, but Christianity provides nothing but shame and guilt. So you have somebody coming up to you making that claim that Christianity is all about shame and guilt, and that the Christian God is not one that they would put their faith in. How might you respond and talk through that if they're willing, assuming they're willing?
Right. My first question would be, where did you arrive at that conclusion? Like, how did you get there? And what experiences have gotten you here? And I would eventually get to this, like, where are you seeing that in the Bible, right? Like, show me where you're seeing this, or help me understand the experiences that you've been through that have gotten you there, because that doesn't line up at all with God's word.
Yeah, for sure.
So what sorry, I'm trying to find these
you're
other
good.
ones. These don't work very well when So here's one that was a little bit more positive towards the video. It says, and kind of critical of the comment section. It says, this comment section makes me feel devastated. I'm not even a religious person, and that doesn't even matter. This comment section is a perfect example of everything that's wrong in today's society. So and I know not everyone has seen all these comments, but if you just look through it, there's so many just awful, negative names being thrown out at each other, or not at each other. Well, yeah, even at each other from even between commenters.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much fighting that's going on. Parker being called names because of the video that he posted, and just, you know, for more context, the video is essentially a promotion of Christian marriage and the Christian view of marriage, which obviously can be a hot button topic in our society today.
Who knew you jump on the internet and you say that a marriage is only for a man and a woman? And
Wow.
I mean, I guess that just means that you're crazy these days, you know?
Yeah. So this person says, "Oh, I see you want everyone to live according to your worldview and only do and believe what you want them to." Which, Parker, is that what you're doing? Is that what your goal is? You just want people to live according to your worldview and do what you want them to?
I mean, in terms of it being best for them, yeah, but there's a lot more that goes, definitely a lot more that goes into that,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of them understanding, you know, sin and, you know, the Holy Spirit and righteousness and just the gospel in and of itself, you know, Jesus and how he came to save us from our sins and all of that stuff. So there's definitely a lot that goes into that. And that's kind of my biggest thing is, you know, I do my best to respond to the ones that are clear enough to respond to. Some of them are absurd, you know, so like just grammar, and you don't really even know what they're saying, so it's hard to respond. And I do my best to respond to the ones that I can get to. Yeah, just respond with love and patience, and I guess that's really all you can do, right?
Yeah. And so here's one more. This is actually from the same person that said that. So it says, I don't think this is hateful. The word is pathetic. Might be a good idea to stop worrying about whether strangers on the internet may or may not be going to hell. Everyone believes in different things, and I think it's a waste of your time, and it's just silly to try and convince people your way is best.
Yeah,
how would you respond?
Did I respond to that one?
It doesn't look like it.
Okay.
Not that I can see.
Pastor Jason, I want to know what you say to that one.
Here, let me hand this one off real quick.
I mean, I can start it off if you want.
Let's go. Yeah, let's let the guy with pastor in front of his name.
Yeah. I mean, technically, you would qualify for that too, right?
So okay, so say the comment again.
All right, I'll read it again. I don't think. So this Parker talked about something being hateful in another response, but this one says, "I don't think this is hateful. The word is pathetic." So the content that Parker posted is pathetic. Might be a good idea to stop worrying about whether strangers on the internet may or may not be going to hell. Everyone believes in different things, and I think it's a waste of your time, and it's just silly to try and convince people your way is best.
So it's really not even, so Parker, I don't want to put words or like motives behind your actions, but it's not it doesn't seem like it would be a desire to say, hey, no, 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 my way is best. You all need to do this. Rather, it seems like, number one, the internet, when we talk about churches and mission fields and whatnot, and, I grew up in a Christian school and a pretty fundamental church. And it got to the point where, there's this desire to send people out, right? Go make disciples, go into all the world, right? And so, if you're going to Zimbabwe or if you're going to, Turkmenistan or wherever, you're going out into the mission field. What I think a lot of people in my generation are missing, that people in the next generation are picking up, is that the internet is one of the biggest mission fields, the digital mission field. It's just ripe with to be able to present the gospel and do it well. And so the second part is, it seems like that's what you're doing. You're just following Jesus and what he said to do, go into all the world. Well, you're not halfway around the world, but not his message.
Yeah.
You can help his message reach halfway around the world just by a few clicks on the keyboard. And so it's more of a matter of obedience. This isn't something that you're trying to convince people of. This is something you're just being obedient to. It's like you love Jesus and love others enough to say, hey, I'm not judging you. I'm not getting into that. I'm saying God has designed a far better way than what a lot of people are following right now. And the reason that there's, the reason that certain medications are skyrocketing, the reason that crime is skyrocketing, the reason that there's a lot of emotional issues and psychological issues. The reason all those things are going up is because we, as a nation, as a society, and even as a human race, have gotten so far removed from God's design and from God's way that everybody's just grasping at something. They're rejecting the truth, but they're grasping at anything else.
Right.
And so what
Absolutely.
you're trying to do is just present there's a better way, guys. I love you enough to tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. With that particular comment, I remember reading it, and this comment is, it kind of encompasses most of the comments, and in terms of the presuppositions underneath, and the presuppositions underneath are there's multiple ways to do things. And if that's the presupposition, you boil that down small enough to the idea that morality is relative. The way I live my life is okay because I say it's okay, and it's just that bottom foundation of pride that I don't answer to anyone. I set my own morality, and I think that that's what I've seen with all of these comments. That I try to respond to, and just like you said, share the truth in love, and get the message out as far as possible. And we do it in our own fun way with movies and reviewing plots, and essentially it's what we should do in our everyday lives. It's kind of our message. but that's really the basis of it, is a misunderstanding of love. 1 Corinthians 13, 5-8, is love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. And what a lot of people miss is it keeps no records of wrongs, and it never rejoices in evil.
Mm.
It doesn't rejoice in evil. And in other places in the Bible, it says, abhor what is evil and cling to what is good. So a lot of it, a lot of what I try to do is combat the moral relativist in the comment section the best I can with like 200 character spaces, which is really, really difficult. So that was kind of my summation of that comment. And then I would also add, you talk about how your generation sometimes misses that. I got you right? That you were saying that like your
Mhm.
generation can kind of miss the
Sure.
web space and the internet. I think that we have to, my generation, next generation, and then raising our kids, we have to get creative and innovative in order to do just that, is combat moral relativism and the non-believing thought in certain character counts.
Yep.
Because, and I mean, obviously there's long form and there's other modes, but um it's increasingly difficult to not be able to just sit across the table from someone, disagree, and still have a conversation in that
Yeah.
dialogue. And we're I kind of believe that it's, the enemy knows how to use, good things in bad ways. And we're dehumanizing each other with technology, and he's using that as a foothold to, you know uh you know decentralize relationships more and more, so that we are only limited to the character count, and then it hinders communication. So
Yep.
I don't know, those are kind of my thoughts with that comment, and then kind of off of what you said.
Yeah, those presuppositions and those baseline beliefs and those foundational things is it, it seems like, and obviously I wasn't born in the 40s or 50s or even 60s 70s. I was born in the late 80s, so um but it does seem like there at one point, at least in our society, there was general agreement on the basic foundations of good. So like
Yeah.
one of the things that there would be general agreement on, even among people who disagree, have differing beliefs, it
Yeah.
was that our rights and come from God, and God's design for life is good.
Do you
And
even
then
think it
like
was
on
that
the
specific, Nick?
I don't necessarily think it was that specific, but I think society operated in a way that kind of assumed it.
So
Even if
would it be more
we
precise?
didn't.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
I was just gonna say, would it be more precise to say that it was more of just belief in the absolute, or the absolutism of morality? Not even that there's a God, but that certain things are just always evil and have always been.
Um, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't argue with you on that at
Okay.
all. I don't think. So I would just say that life in general functioned more like people agreed
Hmm.
on just that general premise. Whether
Right.
they would actually verbally agree or not, I don't really know. But when you get away from the basic foundation of, for instance, as you talk about marriage, God's design is good. When you get away from that basic foundation, that allows all kinds of different beliefs to come in and take over and then start wreaking havoc and
Right.
chaos into the world. And then people hold tightly to those beliefs that are causing chaos, and then it divides people in relationship and like just all of those different things. And I think a lot of what you're talking about and how to communicate online is absolutely relevant, because face-to-face relationships and discussion is so rare
Yeah. And I
about
think
important things.
Right. And I think what you were saying is spot on with how they move away from the foundation that God created. So God says this thing is good. He created this thing to be good and for our benefit. And then when you move that, or you take the foundation out from that, and you cling to something that is of man, that's when we see this, this sexual revelation and all this stuff become people's identity. Like the big thing right now, is we see like, I identify as. This is who I am. I am only my sexuality, or I am only my job, whatever that is. And, you know, obviously we all would probably agree on the issues with that. But it is quite fascinating, these comments and responding and trying to do it in love. And, you know, there's so much that you're not getting because you're not face to face with that person, body
Yep.
language and vocal
Yep.
inflection and all of these things. So it's just, you know, I'll type something out and then I'll send it to 3 different people that are in my close circle, and, you know, they help me, like, did I come across wrong this way, or, you know. So I try to do the best I can with that. Nick, when you do get a second to respond, you're pretty good at it as well. But I really, really try to be meticulous with the comment section for sure.
All right. Well, we did not schedule this for this deep conversation, even though it's good stuff. It's not why we're here.
It is not why
tonight.
we're here.
So let's see if we can get on to movies of the 80s.
Go for
so
it.
I'm going to start with just a true or false question. And I just it's very simple, true or false, and then we'll go from there.
I'm terrified.
The 80s, movies from the 80s. Well, how do I say it? I don't even know how to say the question. The 1980s were the best decade for film. True or false?
True.
And that's why you're here.
Yeah, I would have to say true.
You would say true?
I think I think I would have to say true, only because I'm making some assumptions.
And those are?
And my assumptions are, if you remove inflation, the movies are probably going to profit more. In terms of, you know, I'm sure that there's some comparison if you ratio it out, but I'm sure that the box offices were better. And then I mean, you have a ton of movies that were original and were just, you know, that just became timeless. I'll use that word again because I know how much Nick loves it when I say timeless. You know, I mean, we're what are we? I know we missed the first Star Wars, which is the 4th, so we're probably into the Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, Empire Strikes Back was 1980, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we got the Rambo movies, right? So, like, just Rocky. I mean, there's tons and tons of original stories, and that's my big beef with Hollywood right now is we don't get any original stories. They're all remakes or sequels or, you know, Fast and Furious 27.
Yeah. So, Jason, what you said true as well. And I'm going to say false just because I want to be different. I don't really have a reason. I don't have a reason to say false because I agree with everything Parker said about 80s movies. But what is it that you love about movies of the 80s? And even if you want, like, the 80s in general, is it pure nostalgia for you, or is there more to it than that?
So it's I would almost lump in like late 70s. I would start with 77, 78 and run it through about 95, 96. So that 18-year period is, give or take, is when, man, that's when you just saw box office gold. And that's when you saw so many original stories. You saw creativity it seemed to be like almost the golden age of creativity. Like Parker said, there's so many remakes happening right now, or, you know, let's pick it up. And to be fair, okay, Top Gun Maverick, they did it right. Okay. But there was a lot of, exactly. And there was a lot of question, like, are they going to be able to pull this off? And obviously they did. And why did it work so well? And one of the reasons is, Nick, what you just said. It felt like an 80s movie. So yeah, there's a nostalgia piece for me for sure. But I like that decade or that time period. decade and a half, I guess, of movies, of TV shows, and of music, because they all had, like, they were unique, and there were great stories being told in TV shows or in movies, and great stories being told in songs. That it doesn't happen a lot today.
I agree.
And I do think there was a lot more respect, or maybe, yeah, I think respect's probably the right word, but for the craft.
Yes.
So like for the art of doing all of those things that you mentioned, the music, I mean, maybe with the exception of some hair metal bands that wore a little bit too much makeup or something like that. But, you know, and even those musicianship and things were top notch, and the ability for them to play their instruments and write songs was really top notch. And then, and with movies, you know, from writing to the visual style of it, like all of it, there was obviously a lot of respect for the craft of creating this piece of art, and try to make it as accessible and entertaining as possible, but it's still a work of art in a sense. So there's beautiful shots, and there's like they're pushing the envelope of technology and what can be done at the time, and all of that I think is true of the time frame of the 80s. And then you know, those years that you mentioned, expanding it beyond, just that respect for the craft and being doing that with excellence. Whereas now it's almost like a lot of movies, they're just like, let's get it out on the release calendar, and let's get it into theater as quickly as possible, whether it's had the time, whether it's, you know, whether the script's as good as it can be or not, let's just get it out. Whether, you know, action sequences are as good as they can be or not, let's just get it out. Whether the story makes sense or not, let's just get it out so we can start trying to make some money in theaters. So I think that's a very big,
Well, that right there sums it up
difference.
because it absolutely sums it up with what you're saying. Because in the 80s, in the 80s, it was all about good story, and now it's about let's just make money. And us, as you know, that's kind of our thing too, is we're trying to get people to take back entertainment in a way and be more philosophical and theological about what we watch. Don't watch passive, watch well. And that's going to force better stories. If we get the movement working in that way. Right now we watch passive, watch lazy, and that's what we get lazy films because we're very predictable with what the entertainment that we want, and we'll just go and everything seems to be good, you know. So I completely agree with what you said, Nick, for sure.
Yeah.
So to that point, Nick, like a perfect example of doing something for the art of it is Sylvester Stallone, right? He was down to what, like $35 or $50 or something. He actually sold his dog,
Right.
in order to live for the next 2 weeks until he could sell the script. But he couldn't, for Rocky, I should say. And he didn't sell the script to anybody. Like, he had 3 or 4 offers he turned down.
Right.
And he's like, no, I need to play this part. I know what this is going to take. And look what happened. And then on the flip side, also to your point, Nick, about movies today, and I'll be upfront, like I got sucked into the first, I don't know, phase or whatever of the whole Marvel, you know, cinematic universe. One of the reasons is because well, he wasn't that good in the 80s, but he became a phenomenal actor, is Robert Downey Jr.
Yep.
Yeah.
And playing Iron Man, like, he lifted the entire series. And I read an interview that he gave recently, and he said, sadly, it was around the award show time. He said, sadly, I'll probably never be recognized or honored, you know, win an Oscar or whatever, because he said, I feel some of my absolute best acting work was within the Iron Man Marvel universe. He said, and it was, you know, good movies, but they're not going to win awards.
Right.
So
I mean, I do think you have to give the Marvel Cinematic Universe credit for what they did. I mean, what they did was
Oh,
innovative, and it had never been done
yes.
before like that. To where
Mm-hmm.
you've got so many. I mean, in terms of story, you've got depth to a
Hmm.
level
Yeah.
that has never been matched. So I think that you definitely have to give them credit for that. But it definitely should have ended after Endgame.
In game. Yeah.
Endgame should have been the
There's
last film,
no.
and they should have washed their hands, and left it be this pristine thing,
Yeah. What is it like?
legendary.
Phase 4 or 5
I don't even know. I stopped watching
now?
after Endgame. When I thought the
Yeah.
series should end, when it
You
was
stop.
as
You
good
just
as that,
gave
I
up on it.
stopped.
Yeah.
I stopped watching.
Yeah. So I have an article here. I'm going a little bit out of order, Parker, but
No, you're good.
um, this is an article from MovieWeb, and I just want to get your thoughts on it. This is the 10 most rewatchable movies of the 80s. So I want to go through the article, but before I list off these movies, 10 most rewatchable movies of the 80s, what makes a movie rewatchable?
Oh, I don't know.
Like, how would you even? Is it just, oh, because I've watched it 20 times and I've loved it every time? Or is there something that makes, even like, let's say we have two good movies that you enjoyed. Is it possible for one to be rewatchable and the other not?
Yes.
And then what would be the factor that differentiates the two?
Okay, so and I know I'm going to step on toes when I say this, and so I'm going to
You're
ask
good.
for
You're in good company for that.
I'm asking I'm asking for forgiveness early.
Okay.
Um, Great movies, the Dark Knight trilogy.
It's
Would I
awful. No, I'm
rewatch
kidding.
them? Would I rewatch them over and over and over again? No.
Yes. Absolutely.
And that's why I asked for forgiveness. But you take a movie, and here's the difference between a great movie that I just say that was fantastic. I may watch it again, like if it's on TV or something, but
Mhm.
I'm not going to seek it out. So great movie, not rewatchable versus a great movie that is rewatchable. I think there's going to be a lot of, if you're going to rewatch it over and over, it's because you relate to either the storyline or the character or a set of characters or maybe a relationship happening within that movie. Like it hits you on a deeper level.
Yep. Yeah. Parker, what do you think? Do you agree with that, or
I
is
mean,
there
he
something
yeah, he
else?
kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I was gonna say, I think it's very difficult to nail it down to a precise thing because everybody's different, and what we relate to individually is very different. And I would say the only metric of a good rewatchable movie would be if everything is individual. The more people that a movie relates to, the better that movie is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you make a movie, and I'm kind of cheating because I already know some of these movies, but the reason why they're rewatchable and they relate on a mass scale is because they appeal to humanity in and of itself,
Yes.
whether it be saving the girl or being romanced, or it's just
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to number 10. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, but Christmas Vacation, everybody loves that movie because it's a holiday movie. It's a holiday movie, and everybody knows exactly what the Griswolds go through because
Mhm.
everyone, in some way, shape, or form, by degree, go through that. Go through that family experience during the holidays. So
Yeah.
I think I guess that would be my opinion is everything the more it relates and the more true it is to humanity itself, the more rewatchable it is.
It
Yeah.
almost takes the human experience and satirizes it a bit, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
increases the impacts, but you're
Mhm.
still like,
Yeah.
yeah, I may not have
But that's
said it,
what
but I was
yeah,
totally thinking that.
but that's what makes us feel things. That's another aspect of a good rewatchable movie is it makes you feel heartwarmed or heartfelt or sad or scared. We are always looking for that in our films, and it kind of makes me think of the parables, and when Jesus would tell a parable, that's exactly how, like, he was trying to teach them something. There's a message there, but then there's also has to be some sort of human connection to where, man, I really felt what it was like to work hard and, plow a field or give money away or whatever the parable was encompassing to deliver the message. But it starts with making someone relate to someone, and then they lower their defenses so that the message can be received. And I think that's what embodies a good rewatchable movie, because we seek that out.
And that is exactly why The Dark Knight is the most rewatchable movie ever created. But anyway, that's not an 80s movie, so
I will say, I'm gonna throw this in here just because I want to be on Jason's team and not on Nick's team. Joker, Joaquin Phoenix, I think has Heath Ledger beat slightly.
I mean, you're both free to be wrong. So,
are we suppressing the truth in our own unrighteousness?
It's possible. Yeah. So 10 most rewatchable movies of the 80s. Parker already said number 10, Christmas Vacation. Number 9 is also a Christmas movie. In case there's any doubt, Die Hard.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see Die Hard until probably like 2008. And I think I've seen it about 40 times since.
Yeah.
So it's definitely one of the most rewatchable movies for me. I don't know about you guys, but I've watched it several times. So number 8, The Goonies.
Goonies never say die.
I have a confession to make, fellas.
Don't say it.
I'm probably going to be making the same confession.
Don't say this.
I have never seen The Goonies.
What is happening in the world right now?
And are you ready? Are you ready for this? I have never seen The Goonies.
Okay,
Ever.
guys. Fellas, we just need to cut the live stream now, and you guys need to go watch The Goonies and then bring it back.
But this is why you're here. This is so we needed you here to talk about this stuff. What makes The Goonies rewatchable for somebody that has seen it?
It's everybody wants to go on an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you were, a preteen or an early teenager, and you had to deal with the bullying of the big brother. You had the crush on the girl that you thought was way out of your league. And everybody had a friend like one of the kids in the Goonies. Like you related to somebody in that group. And things are a little different now because, and to a point, they have to be a little different just for safety of the kids, right? Predators are far more active now than they ever were back when that movie was filmed. But I was just driving through my old neighborhood yesterday, and I had my 13-year-old daughter with me, and I'm like, yeah, I grew up in that house. And we used to ride our bikes all over this neighborhood, and we would play on that street, and we would go in that park, and we would climb those trees, and we would have, the G.I. Joes and the He-Mans and all this stuff set up. We'd have a massive fortress built all throughout this because you wanted to, when you're that age, you want to go on an adventure. And so, and quite frankly, you don't outgrow the desire to go on an adventure. You just, you lose the willingness and the bravery to actually do it. And so when you see The Goonies, it is nostalgic to a point, but it's also like, yeah, that would have been fun.
Jason, I have a question to jump off of that. Nick, you can keep us on pace if this goes a little too long, but I think what you said, correct me if I'm wrong here, please. I think you said you lose the desire to go on the adventure. Do you think that it's loss of desire, or do you think that as we age, we forget that we are already on an adventure?
It's both.
You
It's
think it's
so
both?
so desire probably wasn't the right word. It was probably maybe a loss of it's not desire, it's not ability, but it's like somewhere in there. You think, well, I'm too old for that now, or
We just get comfortable.
yeah, I have bills to pay, and I have, my schedule's too full. I can't get time away to go do this or that or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I used to, I haven't done it for a while, and she's actually getting mad at me, but every night that my wife and I switch nights, so we alternate nights on who gets to tuck our daughter into bed and stuff. And on my nights, I would tell a story, and every single time she would ask for a story with an adventure in it, like some kid going off into a magic forest and encountering some monster and overcoming the monster and all of those things, just some type of adventure. So that definitely resonates. Number 7 most rewatchable movie is Ghostbusters. I'm not at all surprised by that being on the list.
Is that correct me, is that the one with Bill Murray?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What did you just ask?
Yeah.
What's happening
How
right
did you
now?
not? Yeah. How did you not know?
No, I thought I knew. I just wanted to make
Okay.
sure, because
All
there's
right.
like
Making
there's
sure.
like 4 of them now.
Yeah, and
We
there's
made it like
actually
3 or
one
4
coming
times.
out.
There's one.
There's
Yeah,
one
there's
coming
another
out
one coming out.
I
So I'm
think
just
this
making
month
sure
or next month.
Nick didn't put the the movie notes in the notes. So
Yeah, well, it was just called
I'm gonna hit
Ghostbusters.
pause real quick. I just was told that there's music looping over the live stream and people can't hear the voices.
is
Oh no.
that better?
I don't know. I'm here with you guys. I don't know. Hopefully, hopefully
I
that
can try to
fixed it.
pull up the live stream
We'll
and see.
see.
Well, I think I may have just fixed it, but hopefully that they can still hear something, because we've been talking for 42 minutes.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. Number 6,
Okay.
Poltergeist.
Oh, I wouldn't. Okay. All right. I wouldn't have thought that Ghostbusters. I totally would have. Yeah, I watched that one on a semi-regular basis. Here's the thing, and
I've never seen
especially with comedies, you pick up just little nuance, little statements, little jokes that, um, well, I know I didn't pick up as a kid. Um,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, perfect example in Ghostbusters, Dan Aykroyd's character was, super, super smart, but also kind of a dope all at the same time, right? And he stopped everybody. He's like, listen, do you guys smell something? It's like, what? What do you mean, listen, do we smell something? Like, it's just little jokes like that. It's, oh my word. It just keeps you coming back for more.
And I've never seen Poltergeist. So,
I saw it once. It's okay. I wasn't. I was
yeah.
like, yeah.
Yep. Number 5, Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
That's a quotable movie. It
Any
just
quotes
is.
that can be shared on live
Probably
air?
not. Probably not.
No.
But so, and some of it's just a generational thing. A few weeks ago, we were out visiting my older son's fiance's family. They're getting married here in a few weeks, and so we went out there, and it was a good weekend. And they said, "Hey, since you're out here, you need to try some East Coast pizza." And so the name of the place was, I think, called Spatoli's. But immediately in my brain, 80's mind, I'm like, Spicoli. And no one else in the room got it except her parents. And they were both laughing. They're like, Spicoli, that dude was bad news. But it's little stuff like that. Spicoli is the star of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's just funny stuff.
So
Can't
again,
recommend
I've
it
never
as a
seen
pastor, but it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's good because I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I've never seen that one.
You're missing some jokes, but it's a little. No, it's not a little. It's a lot risque.
Number 4 is Gremlins.
See, that's
gotta-
a bit of an underrated movie.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I have seen. Yeah, Parker, were you going to say something?
I was just gonna say I haven't seen this one either.
You haven't seen this
Oh
one
my
either.
gosh.
So I have seen Gremlins, but it has been a very, very long time. And I probably, if I watched it today, it would probably feel like the first time I've ever seen it. But I have seen it before because it used to be
So
on
it's a
TV.
Christmas movie.
Yeah.
Gremlins is a Christmas movie, and so we watched it at the around Christmas time. And I was, I'm just quoting the movie, and my family's like, "Please stop. This is
Stop.
like this
Can
is
you go in
funny."
another room?
Yeah.
Let us watch the movie. Number 3 is one that I think might have been in the 90s and in the early 2000s, might have been on TV more than any other movie, at least in
Shawshank
my
Redemption.
experience.
No, that's 90s.
No. This is just my experience. I could be wrong about that, but The Breakfast Club.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was on TV like every Saturday morning somewhere. On
That
some
is
channel.
absolutely a rewatchable movie
Yeah, it is.
without fail.
I mean, that's got every relatable humanity thing from high school for all eternity. Like everyone will always be able to relate to that, unless you were homeschooled, I guess. But
Yeah, like your kids.
If we ever
right?
did, if we ever did another like 80s series at the church, The Breakfast Club would be included. Because if you think about, I mean, obviously outside of the gospel, outside of theology, the church is what the Breakfast Club should resemble.
Mhm.
Different people from different walks of life coming together and realizing we have more in common than we have as individuals.
Yep.
Pastor Jason doing a movie review.
Number 2, Back to the Future Part 2.
Okay.
Now, when was number 3 made?
90s.
It was 90s.
Early 90s, yeah.
Mhm.
I think two was either part 2 was 88 and part 3 was 89, or part 2 was 89 and part 3 was 90. But they were made at the same time. They were just released a year apart.
That's right.
I didn't know they were made at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
There's
I
a lot
didn't
of
know they started
nuances in
doing
there.
that until
They always had the next film at the end of the film that was concluding. So like with 1, it was like the number 2 was at the very end, and then you know what I'm saying? Like the little trailer
like-
thing.
So fun fact,
I mean-
for when number 1 came out, there was no to be continued. There,
Oh, really?
in the movie theater, that wasn't there. It was
Oh,
so
I didn't know that.
popular. Yeah, it was so popular that they added it on the home release.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense
Which-
because that's what I've seen. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And back
What
then,
was it-
you had to wait for like VHS tapes to come out, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have DVDs, and you were waiting months from the time you saw it in the theater to the time you could go to the store to rent it.
do you we asked this question when we recorded Back to the Future. It comes out tomorrow. Do you if you had to pick a cast, just briefly, could you pick a cast if they were to remake that franchise? If they were to do a
Okay.
reboot?
Okay, number 1, that should never happen.
Agreed.
Don't mess with near perfection.
Yeah.
But if I am forced to pick, are you telling me you're forcing me to pick?
Mhm.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you could always decline.
That would make for much of a podcast. Okay, so Tom Holland as Marty McFly. I would probably plug in. Um, I would either do Robert Downey Jr. or Benedict Cumberbatch as Doc.
Oh, those are
Hmm.
good. I'm into that.
Um, and then you could fill out the Biff. Um, man,
Just don't say
I'd
the
have
rock.
to. No, 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 no. I could see like a John Cena pulling off a
Oh,
Biff
that
because
would
he's
be
just
okay.
goofy enough to do it.
Yeah, I could see
Yeah.
that. That's fun.
Yeah, I would start with those guys and build it out from
Doc
there.
is such a iconic character, man.
Right?
Yeah.
Iconic.
I mean, you could just make him a little older and use Christopher Lloyd again.
That's the thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think Robert
All
Downey
right.
Jr. would be good.
This
But we
this won't
shouldn't
be
do it. They shouldn't do it.
Yeah, no, they
No,
should never remake. No. I
no,
mean, maybe in like 100 years or something, but
no,
no, not even
no,
then. Yeah.
no.
Well, we might not be here, right? So
Well, if we want to get okay, all right.
yeah, if you want to get into
Oh,
that,
shoot. Oh, break out the
the
eschatology,
rapture comes
boys.
on the day before release, probably.
Right? Yeah.
But so we've already ventured into talking about the movie that's number one because it's the original Back to the Future. Is the number one rewatchable movie of the 80s. And I can't discount that whatsoever.
Nope.
Have no.
I mean, I've seen all three of those movies probably, I don't know, a lot. Probably 50 times.
Yeah.
We just finished watching the trilogy last week as a family.
It's so good. The
Oh,
Wild Wild West one's my favorite.
yeah.
It's my
Part
favorite.
three's.
Clint Eastwood.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think anything can beat part one. Part one is just
It's
because it's the
classic.
original. It's
Yeah.
the original idea. It's the one that spawns everything after it. But
I would say it's probably the most nostalgic. It's probably the most iconic. But for me, I was like, number 3 is like just so fun because they're in the
It
Wild
really
West.
is.
Like my
It is
favorite
so
part
much
was when
fun.
he goes through the billboard and he's like, "Oh, and those Indians won't even be there." And then he goes through the billboard and they're all right there.
Indians.
Yep. Bears. So
so
good.
I'm kind of surprised that like Indiana Jones. None of the Indiana Jones movies are on the list. Are they? Would you consider them rewatchable? I mean, or not so much.
Which is interesting because I mean that's pure adventure, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Different type of adventure. I mean the 80s had a bunch of futuristic stuff, right? I mean Terminator stuff was starting to come out then too, right?
Yeah. Mid 80s.
So it was a lot of
1984.
it was like technology, and so maybe it just kind of fit the trend.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then Indiana Jones was like a different. I mean, it's still iconic, but I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah. And very few of those movies that are on this, and obviously this is just one article's opinion, so I'm sure we could go through and there's probably tons of movies that we would like Poltergeist.
Right.
I've never seen it, but I would imagine if I watched it, I would not put it on a rewatchable list. But the majority of the movies that made the list of rewatchable movies weren't box office hits.
Mm.
Or maybe a better way to say it is they weren't like runaway top box office hits. They might have made money and they might have done fine, but they aren't the most popular movies of all time in terms of box office unless you look at, I mean, Back to the Future was top 8 of the 80s, but so there seems to be a disconnect between what was incredibly popular in theaters and what people continue to watch at home. So if we look at the movies that were popular in theaters in the 80s, number 1 was E.T.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 was Return of the Jedi. Number 3 was The Empire Strikes Back. Number 4 was Batman from 1989.
That was a great
Number
one.
5, yeah. Number 5, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. 6 was Ghostbusters, so that one was on the list. 7 was Beverly Hills Cop.
I just watched that series last week.
Thoughts? Is it rewatchable?
Part 1 is, and
Part
part
1
2 is. Part 3, not
Okay.
at all. 3 was rough.
Yeah. So that earned, in the entire decade of the 80s, Beverly Hills Cop 1 earned the 7th highest box office total. Number 8 was Back to the Future. Number 9 is Top Gun, which I'm kind of surprised wouldn't have been on a rewatchable list. And then number 10, I don't even know what this movie is. I've never heard of it before in my life. And that might just be my own ignorance, but the 10th highest box office total of the 80s is a movie called Tootsie.
That came out in the early
phenomenon.
80s. Have you seen it?
It's great.
You've seen it?
I love Tootsie. It's great. It's great. I think it's a great movie. You can judge me all you want, but it's great.
I
It
can't
is a good
judge you
movie.
because I've never even heard of it. I didn't even know there was a movie called Tootsie in existence.
Yeah, it's Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's Dustin Hoffman,
All right.
and the entire. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I think the entire plot is something to do with either he's trying to get an acting job
Mhm.
or win a girl, or maybe a combination of the both. And he has to dress up and create this whole persona as a female in order to go about, achieving whatever he's trying to achieve. And it's great.
Okay.
It is a good movie.
You could not make that movie today,
Not a
Yeah.
chance.
but it's so good.
So it sounds like the basis for at least one episode of every 90s sitcom.
Just about.
Is that, so like
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yep.
Got it. But yeah, I've never heard of it. So I was shocked to
Tootsie,
see that
Tootsie's good. Yep.
top 10 box office. But so are there any movies from that top box office list that you would have included in most rewatchable? If you were making your own list.
I mean, on behalf of my father, I would say Top Gun.
But you wouldn't
I don't
include
know
that?
if I would. I don't know if I would say Top Gun is most rewatchable. I mean, I've seen Top Gun a lot, but I would probably say it's more rewatchable than some of these other ones on the list. But yeah, I don't know. It really just comes down to the person and what they
Mhm.
like and what mood you. I mean, rewatchable too is like what mood you're in that day.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
so we haven't really touched on that either.
Yeah. So it's like, are you in the mood for The Dark Knight or Batman Begins?
So like,
Right,
yeah,
that's-
like, okay, well, yeah, what you're saying is true though. Like, so
Yeah.
your Dark Knight would probably be like, if I had to pick the most rewatchable movie ever, like number one, it's probably for me, it's probably a tie between 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, and Gladiator. Those would probably be like tied top one or 1, 2, somewhere in there. So that would be pretty similar to The Dark Knight for you,
Mhm.
Nick.
Yeah. So what contributes to like all these movies, huge box office successes, and if you adjust for inflation, they blow like almost anything out of the water today. So what do you contribute? So there's a difference between movies that are, I keep starting to ask the question and then coming back to explain more. So bear with me on this, but there's a difference between movies that get insanely popular in theaters and the ones that kind of stand the test of time, and to use Parker's word, timeless, that they're timeless and they remain kind of in circulation for a really long time, if not forever. So there are some movies that do both, like the original Star Wars. Even before the modern sequels, it was, it developed all this fandom and people that,
Oh.
would would watch it all the time, and it was almost like a cult, right? Like people who love Star Wars. And so there are movies like that are both. They're huge box office, and they also kind of stand the test of time. Titanic, in Parker's opinion, would be an example of that. A movie that had a huge box office and then also is still, you can still watch it today, and it holds up. And there's still a demand for it. But then there are also those that have they have huge box office, and then over time they become less and less kind of in the public mind, and people kind of forget about them. An example of that, modern times, the first Avatar, like, was huge in the theaters. Like, everyone had to see that movie in theaters, and then no one ever talked about it again until the sequel came out. Like, it was just kind of in existence, and people kind of forgot about it. And then it came back to that when the sequel came out, but it didn't last like other movies that are that popular do. So what do you think causes that type of reaction in viewers? It's enough to motivate them to go pay their money to see it in the theaters, but it doesn't stay. It doesn't stick around like maybe some other movies, or even some movies that were lesser popularity, like The Breakfast Club, and movies that are continually in the public conversation, and movies that kind of stand the test of time in that way. What do you think causes that type of phenomenon? Is it just the hype? People want to be a part of the hype of a new movie that's supposed to be the best thing, and so they go to the theater, whereas a movie like The Breakfast Club is smaller, there's not action scenes, but when somebody watches it, it resonates. So just like, what would you attribute that to? Or what are the multiple things even potentially that you could attribute that to?
So anytime you're telling a story, especially with movies, you have to figure out, and this is communication 101, know your audience, right? Who are you trying to attract or speak to, or in this case, sell a ticket to? With movies, you have to be relatable on a number of levels for the movie to stand the test of time. For a movie to stand the test of time, you have to, especially if they're more current movies, you have to remove anything that dates it to a specific time period. Like making like political jokes about, the current administration. That's not going to stand up in 5 years. It's going to be like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that guy, whatever. That was lame. But like we were just talking about Back to the Future Part 3, the Old West, everybody has their ideas and concepts about the Old West. And so they didn't get into the details of, like, well, who was the president back then? And, making comments about that. It was just about life in general. And that creates a very broad spectrum to reach a number of people. And I mean, quite frankly, there's a lot of buying power in the flyover states, right? While if you look at electoral colleges, they all reside on the, either in the Northeast or out on the West Coast. But there's you can't lose sight of the mainstream that operates, between the coasts, because that's where a lot of people live, a lot of people work hard, a lot of people spend their money, and they're going to be selective about what they spend their money on. They're not, even in today's world, as woke as, the coasts want to be, that's not fully true for a vast majority of, the Midwest and of the Great Plains and the South. And so there's still almost unspoken standards and, unspoken morals that people are generally going to operate by. And so if you create a story that reaches those and operates within kind of those boundaries, you'll have something that'll stick.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Rocky sticks.
Oh, sure.
That's why And a movie that's really close to home has not been mentioned here, but Hoosiers, maybe definitely one of
Great.
the best sports
Yeah.
movies of all time.
Ever. Yeah.
Mhm.
But it doesn't. It's obviously dated in that, you can tell, oh, this was back in the 50s or whatever. But there's not those specific details or jokes that won't land anymore, or stories that won't land anymore. Because good or bad, I mean, there's still farm life, and a lot of people can still look. Oh yeah, I have to go out and do the chores, and he's staying in the barn because we don't have anywhere else. And I mean, like that. That stuff still happens in a lot of places today.
I think I'm gonna double down on story to answer that question because Nick and I we debate about production costs and budgets and stuff. And I think one thing that we can agree on is a budget can help a movie do better, but not always. I think that to answer your question, Nick, a lot of what happened with Avatar, I think, was um, the technology. It was new for the time, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that uh, I mean, like we said it in our review of Avatar. It's Pocahontas, so it's Pocahontas with futuristic technology, IMAX cameras and LED walls and green
And blue
screens
aliens.
and
Yeah.
blue aliens. Yeah, so I think that those are the things that fade. Those are the things that fade is the technology, the green screens, the
Mm-hmm.
CGI. If it's just that and it's a remake or it's not an original story, it's gonna fade into the background over time. Where we see these timeless movies are, I think, I'm assuming a little bit here. I don't have any data or sources to back this up, but what I would assume or feel comfortable guessing at would be most of these timeless films are either a very well done movie depicting a historical event
Mm-hmm.
or or an original story that lasts and relates to a lot of people over time through generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with everything that both of you said. Um, yeah, and especially that part that story trumps everything, because a lot of the movies coming out now, their budgets have ballooned to like astronomical
Mm-hmm.
No.
numbers, and
Yeah.
Three, four,
even
6, 800 million.
yeah, the budgets are ridiculous, and part of that is a lot of them were delayed over COVID, and they had to
Mm-hmm.
stall and everything. But I think what we're seeing now is that a big budget movie isn't enough to get people in the theater, even. So like the movies that now, I think this is something that society is shifting on a little bit, is I think the movie going public needs something that they can't see in high quality at home, or as high quality at home, in order to go to the theater. So like, Dune Part 2 is releasing
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, and they're projecting really big opening weekends. And the big selling point of that is it's filmed with cameras that even if you watch it on a 4K TV at home, you're not going to get the full thing. It is absolutely impossible to experience this movie the way it's intended anywhere other than the biggest screen that's available to you. It's just not possible. So that might be a movie that motivates people to get to the theater, but the story of it and whether people can relate to it is what will determine whether, even though it's not the highest quality at home, will people continue to watch it? Will they buy it at home? Will they stream it? So all of that big stuff might be able to motivate somebody to buy a ticket, but will the story resonate enough to stick with the person once they've watched it, and they'll want to keep it going and keep it alive and keep it in their mind. Yeah, so that's really all the stuff that I had. But so go ahead if you guys have more to to bring up or to talk about.
So, a couple things, and it's kind of coming full circle. But then, Nick, in that email that you sent me about spiritual themes within 80s movies, I'm like, oh, okay, we can dig into that a little bit. But um, bringing it back around to the story before we get into that is coming full circle on this entire conversation. It kind of started off with, it's almost a lost art in that people were relying so heavily on technology and CGI and green screens and blue screens and this and that, man, where's the actual acting? Not acting against, somebody dressed up in one of those green suits with the little dots all over them, but
yeah,
like, where's the connection? Like, I can't imagine a movie. I can't imagine hardly any John Hughes movie being a huge budget today, but every one of his movies has staying power. Like, who doesn't still watch, at least for a while, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? Who doesn't watch The Breakfast Club? Who doesn't watch, 16 Candles or Uncle Buck, right? Or a John Candy movie. They like, it's still people. And when the person gets so into the character and can portray a character so well, one of the most underrated rewatchable movies, and it's holiday themed, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles from the 80s, Thanksgiving movie, absolute riot. Like, it's just like, because Steve Martin and John Candy couldn't be more opposite in their characters, or really even as people, but the chemistry that they have within that movie is just, and at the end, it will tug at your heartstrings. Like, like, I can cry at you can get just about anything to get me to cry. Like, God's blessed me with a tender heart. That's fine. I accepted it long ago. But that movie, yeah, it'll get me every time because you relate to it in so many ways.
So we had a little over a year ago, we had our first guest on an episode of the podcast, and the two movies that she was choosing between to review was either Dead Poets Society or Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And we ended up going with Dead Poets Society. So two very different movies, obviously, but we ended up going with Dead Poets Society. But we definitely need to come back to that one and do that one at some point.
For sure.
Oh, it's a classic. That needs to be like next Thanksgiving. Like, that one gets released around Thanksgiving.
Yeah. There you go. We'll put it in the schedule.
So what about those spiritual themes, Jason? So you said you were kind of intrigued and like, we can go there.
Well, yeah, so I started actually, and pardon my arm being up here, I'm scrolling on my cheat sheet here, but I started thinking, I'm like, oh, I need to watch well, right? And so I go back, and I'm not watching just for the great story, but I started thinking over the last day and a half, I'm like, what are some spiritual themes that I could, that really may be obvious and overt in some of these movies, but may also not be. And I think you said you read a number of lists, but one of them, I think the top grossing movie of the 80s is that the one where number one was E.T.?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, it was.
Okay, so if you think about it, E.T. is from the heavens, come to earth, is a healer, has a small following that loves him dearly, that he loves. He dies and is resurrected and returns to the heavens. I'm like, oh my word. And so I actually,
more obvious, right?
Right? So yeah. I actually Googled
that
this.
Sounds really familiar.
I've read this somewhere.
I
Googled it, and one of the Spielberg wouldn't necessarily confirm this, but one of the writers said, absolutely, I was very obvious in what I wanted to do. And yes, it does he does in a way portray and shadow Christ in a way. I was like, oh my word. Like, you know, it's just, it's really, really good. So yeah, there's a few of them that are like that. I mean, do you want me to just read what I have and then you guys
Yeah, go for it.
bounce it around or okay. All right. So Star Wars, obviously, right? Like, okay, good versus evil. And there's, you know, this invisible force that empowers and strengthens us and helps us make good choices. And, you know, it can be like a visible manifestation of the spiritual battle raging all around. Like that one's good. This one is a little bit before the 80s, but Superman, Christopher
Mm-hmm.
Reeve, you know, lives as a human, has supernatural strength, heart of compassion, uh, just trying to be, didn't come to serve or be served, but to serve. And even to the point where he gave his life. And I'm like, oh my word, I mean, the more I sit here and thought about it, I just kept coming up with stuff, you know,
Yeah.
back to Hoosiers, you know, it's almost like a David and Goliath kind of thing. It's a story of the underdog that just perseveres in the midst of trials and is, you know, blessed by the win at the end. Um, Another movie that's a classic 80s movie that has not been mentioned is The Princess Bride. Have you guys
Oh,
seen The
yes.
Princess Bride?
That's a great movie.
Yes.
Okay, so think about it. It's some of the themes presented in that movie are we see that regularly in the Bible, and that pain is just a part of life sometimes, and it doesn't always go. You know, we're not promised that everything's going to go the way we want it to go, but even in the midst of pain, we can still see that humans and people have value, and that love, true love, right, can like is worth pursuing. And it's so, you know, like I don't know. And then there's The Breakfast Club. We already got into that one.
Yeah.
Um, I think, quite frankly, if any of us had access to a box of plutonium and a DeLorean, um, we would all hit 88 miles an hour and go back to try to fix something in our past that we screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so there's that desire for redemption and that desire for um man, I can't get rid of it. How do I undo it? Because there is shame and there is guilt. And even though the gospel says shame off of you, Jesus bore that on the cross. Sometimes we still get wrapped around that axle, and the enemy uses that to beat us down. Like, who wouldn't want to go back and undo that, you know, whatever that sin, whatever that thing was, uh, to try to change things. Um, and then a couple obvious ones that have been, one of them's been mentioned. You know, we do know where the Ark of the Covenant is, thanks to Indiana Jones, right? And lesson that we learned from Ferris Bueller is confirming, you know, remember the Sabbath, take the day off.
Yep.
I don't know. Those are just some of the fun ones that I came up with.
Yeah.
But
So I have something to say about Star Wars. And before either of you take me the wrong way, I really like Star Wars. I love Star Wars. Okay. But the fundamental premise of the movie is flawed with the balance of the force and the balance of good and evil, right? If the fundamental premise of the movie is that it's always balanced, meaning there's as many Jedi as there are Sith lords, wouldn't the best thing that the Jedi could do is to sacrifice all of themselves so that the Sith die, so that there's still balance and there's no evil?
I thought could only be two Sith lords.
But
There's
what I'm
only two
saying is,
Sith at any time, right?
right, you may be correct, but
I'm
what I'm
getting a
saying
little
is, yeah, but what I'm saying is if all of the Jedi die, there would
Mhm.
not be balance in the Force, right?
Right.
So then
Order 66, right?
you would have to, like, the Sith, like, there's just kind of a fundamental flaw.
I'm with you.
Just to ruin Star Wars for everyone.
I don't think you're going to ruin it for anybody, but
Fair.
Episodes 7, 8, and 9 ruined it for me, so you're fine.
there you go. Yeah. It's already
Yep.
been ruined for everybody.
already been
you
ruined.
can't ruin it for anybody because it's already
Yeah.
been ruined for everybody. That what you talked about with I think it was when you were talking about Back to the Future, Jason, going back in time and doing over something that, or correcting a mistake that you've made and getting shame. I think it was in that same conversation you used the phrase shame off you. That goes full circle to one of those comments that we read at the beginning, where the person, their claim was that Christianity is just nothing but shame, like that. And I'm not going to negate that they might feel that way, that there could be Christians in their life that have caused them to feel nothing but shame, and there's been no forgiveness or anything like that. That's definitely a possibility. But the reality is, just right in line with what you said, rather than shame and shaming you for what you've done, Christianity does recognize that there's a penalty for what we've done, right? So maybe that causes a person to feel shame. Maybe that's what they're talking about, is that, there's a penalty here and I'm feeling the weight of that, so therefore I'm feeling shame. But what the Bible does and what Jesus does is take that a step further to remove that from you, to take that shame away from you, to take that penalty, to take that weight off of you. And so to stop at just you're a sinner and you're dead and you have no hope, without then going further and also talking about redemption, that's also a mistake that many in our society can make. Many who claim to be Christians can talk a lot about sin and how our society is, like going straight to hell and things like that, and our society is falling, but they don't in the same breath then also offer the hope and a way forward. And so I think that causes a lot of people to feel that sense of just shame and hopelessness as it relates to Christianity, because all they see is their own sin and their own mistakes. But we should really be serious about taking it that step further to say Jesus died and paid that penalty, and that weight that you feel was on him, and you can release it. You can repent of your sins, have faith in him, and be completely free of that weight.
I agree, and it works the other way too, right? So like in my experience is it's mostly the grace and mercy. It's mostly the grace and mercy. So the exact opposite of what you're talking about. So if it's just as bad to only talk about God's wrath and his hatred of sin and that shame that you're talking about. It's just as bad to only talk about the grace and mercy. Because in one side, like you were saying, Nick, you only have shame. But in the other, if you only talk about God's grace and mercy, there's no need for a savior.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, it's so perfect. It's, don't add, don't take away, nothing. Just there's shame, and it was paid for by the cross and Jesus' sacrifice, and then hope, grace, mercy, forgiveness. And we've got to do, as Christians and church members, discipleships, pastors, evangelism. We've just got to do a better job at communicating all of it, the whole story.
Absolutely. I think one of the reasons, speaking of the whole story and kind of tying some of this together, one of the reasons that this movie, I want to say it was last year, maybe it's been out for 2 years now. I don't know. I've lost track of time. But it was almost a breakout movie in the theaters. No one expected it to do as well as it did, because and it did well. It presented the gospel clearly, but it also, there wasn't a heavy budget. There wasn't a lot of technology. It was just acting, and it was just people doing what they did. The Jesus Revolution movie, I can't remember when it came out, but it kind of turned a lot of heads. And I think it portrayed a lot of good and bad, within the church. And I think it presented, the struggle with sin, but also the need and the opportunity to receive grace, mercy, and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think
we
I
actually
watched.
did.
We did. Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. We did Jesus Revolution, and after I got done watching it, I texted Nick. Do you remember what I said to you?
I don't remember exactly what you said, but you were.
I texted him. I said, I have no idea what to think about that movie.
Right?
Yeah.
It took
I
me a
get
little
it.
bit. Took me a little
Yep.
bit to formulate on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they don't. I mean, I think it was rated PG-13. I'm not. So within the confines of PG-13, they don't hold back on anything either.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Right.
they portray the good things, they portray the bad things, and they do that in both the before and after Christ phase of the lives of the people in the thing.
Mhm.
So it's very like there are still bad things and things the church shouldn't do in that after Christ phase where the church is growing and things like that. There's probably things in there that they shouldn't have been doing, but they don't. Yeah, they just don't sugarcoat any of that, and they just give you the whole picture. And I think that was definitely a good thing. Like this is what happened, and that's that was refreshing to see, because a lot of Christian movies kind of sugarcoat that and just show you the best of everything and make it an easy path to everything being wonderful and perfect. So it was refreshing to see that not be the case in Jesus Revolution.
All right. So before we, Nick, do you have anything else?
I don't.
Okay, so I've got technically two questions for Pastor Jason before we get off. And Pastor Jason, it's totally okay if you don't have an answer. The first question is, have you seen the movie Nefarious?
I don't think I have.
Okay. I was going to ask you your opinion on that movie, but it's all good, man.
Yeah, I don't think I have.
It's newer. It came out last year.
So as much as I love going to see movies and just the whole theater experience, right? I've become it's going to have to be a really good trailer, or it's going to have to you're going to have to sell me on it, because it's to the point where I really don't trust Hollywood very much. I mean, not that I ever really did trust Hollywood, right? But there have been so many movies in the last few years that I'm like, okay, I think this is going to be really good. And it turns out the trailer was the best part of the movie. So it's like, yeah.
Or the
I'm out.
trailer was the movie.
Or, right. Yeah.
Anymore, it's like, oh, I just watched the trailer and the plot, characters, it was all there.
It's all right there.
Even the plot twists.
So would you recommend that I see this movie?
I was just curious. So watch it at your own risk.
Right.
I mean, you'll probably watch it now because I asked, but Nick and I had some pretty harsh criticism. It's technically a Christian movie. And we all know how those usually go. But
Left Behind.
Well, it was not that bad, but it's pretty bad.
But only because of the end.
Right? Yeah, if you do watch it, as soon as the screen goes black, shut it off. Just hit pause and be done with it.
All right.
And now you're gonna be so curious, you're gonna watch the whole thing, and then you're gonna realize, and then you're gonna send Nick a text message and be like, I understand why Parker told me to turn it off after the stream.
Yeah. I'll be like, I didn't hit pause, and now I'm sorry I didn't hit pause.
Yeah, I think to quote Nick before we jump off here, I will never watch the movie again because of the end. I don't know if that's a direct quote, maybe more of a paraphrase.
I don't think that's a direct quote, but that's the sentiment I felt after watching it for sure.
So. All right,
cool.
Yeah, I'm going to be watching it then.
Pastor Jason, we appreciate you coming on. hanging out with us for an hour and 30 minutes. Hopefully we can get you on an actual movie review someday. That'd be fun.
That'd be fantastic. It was an absolute pleasure joining you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right, man. And we will see you guys next week. Do all the social media stuff. We'll see you then.